send you another little video of the most recent one.
Yeah, it's really
this chapter in chapter 5. So in chapter 4, we got up to by the end of chapter 4, we got up to this point where the Kohanim who had been chosen to remove the ash from the golden altar that's inside the Heichal, and the Kohen who was chosen to take the oil and the ash from the 5 of the candles, as it were, right? The cups of oil on the menorah. They finished their work, and hang on a second. Let's see if we could just keep all this together here for a second. Just use this. Tamid. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. That's the end of Perek Gimel. So at the end of, so by the way, I just want to point out, oh, just a second. Moshe's iPhone. This is Moshe Chaim. Let's see if he connects. All right, well, hopefully he'll connect. But wait a second. There we go. Okay, Moshe Chaim, are you here?
Yes.
Hi. Long time no see.
Okay, as long as my connection holds up and I don't do anything to screw it up.
No, that's fine. I'm giving a very brief summary, not of everything that we've done, but just some of the recent things we've done. We're going through the order that things were done every day in the Beit HaMikdash. So I'm picking up actually from the middle of something, and I just wanted to keep this straight in our minds. So at the end of Perek Shlishi, the end of the 3rd Perek in Tamid, we talked about this. We said, Misha zacha b'dishum mizbeach ha'pnimi nichnas v'natal ateni v'nichol lefanav. So the person who won the lottery to clean off the mizbeach ha'pnimi, the golden altar for bringing the Ktoret, so he went in with this vessel that was called a teni, which was kind of a basket, and he would put all of the ashes in there. And then the person who went in with him is the person who was Zoche B'dishun HaMenorah, the person who won the lottery for cleaning the menorah. And then I won't go through this again right now, although we will come back to it. But the Mishnah here and the Bar Tanura in a lot of detail describes exactly what he did. And the quick version of it is that he would go in, that the Bar Tanura understands that the menorah was placed along the southern wall of the Heichal, like the first main chamber of the Beit HaMikdash, and it was going from east to west. And so if he comes in and he finds that the 2 easternmost lights are still lit, then he cleans the other 5, and he leaves those burning in their place. And then if he finds that those had gone out, then he needs to clean them and light them from any other lights that are already lit, that that are still burning. and then he cleans the 5. In other words, the main thing that he has to accomplish at this point, he has to clean the 5 westernmost lights on the menorah. But he doesn't light the menorah, except, as it says, if the western light, what we call the western light, which is the second from the east, if that went out, then he has to light it. He has to light that in the one neck in the easternmost. Okay. Now, so there are 3 stairs, 3 stone stairs that lead up to the menorah, and that's where he stands when he did this cleaning of the menorah. He put all of the excess, all of the old oil and the wicks and any of the ash, he put into a smaller kind of vessel called a kuz, and he left it on the 2nd step and he went out. So we're going to revisit now. Both of these people, the person who cleaned the Mizbeach HaKtoret and the person who cleaned the menorah, they leave the vessels that have their ash inside of the Heichal, and then they go out. And in Perek Revi'i, we went through the slaughtering of the Korban Tamid and how it was cut up into various pieces, and then how those pieces got taken and put on the ramp going up to the Mizbeach on the western side from halfway down. And then in the beginning of the Perek that we're on, in the 5th Perek, they take a break to daven, even though this is not a full davening, but this is what they daven at this point. They davened Ahava Rabbah, or according to the Rambam and some other Rishonim, they said Ahavat Olam, which is also a difference between the Nusach of Nusach Sfard and Nusach Ashkenaz, how you start that bracha. And then they read the 10 Commandments, they read all of the paragraphs of Shema, then they said 3 brachot. They said Emet V'Yatziv, the first bracha after Shema, bracha of Avodah, which we talked about, and they said Birkat HaKohanim. I'll just point out the Rambam the Rambam held that he doesn't say here Birkat Kohanim in the Mishnah Torah. He says that they said Sim Shalom. So I think at some point I want to revisit a little bit about this, because it is a reflection to some degree about how our davening works. But here I'll show you. It's here in Hilchot Tamidin Musafin, Perek Shishi, in the 6th chapter. And at some point, maybe we'll read through all of this Rambam, because the Rambam is summarizing more or less what we're learning here in Masachet Tamid. And when he's summarizing this Mishnah about what they did, he says, right? So this is the Kohanim, they've all gathered now in Mishkat HaGazit to say these brachot. So he tells everybody to say one bracha, V'hein potchim v'korin ahavat olam. They read ahavat olam, they read the bracha of ahavat olam, v'aseret hadibrot, u'shma v'hayayim shemoa, v'yomer, v'emet v'yatziv, u'ritzei. Ritzei, of course, is, we also call Birkat HaAvodah. And he says, V'sim Shalom. He doesn't say Birkat Kohanim. And it also says that, according to the gears that we have, that they say Birkat Kohanim, they just said Birkat Kohanim. That's not, I think we mentioned this at the time, that's not when they duchen. That's not when the Kohanim actually went to say, to Levarech Ta'am. But they would say Birkat HaKohanim. The Rambam here says that they said Sim Shalom, right? So we put we put Birkat HaKohanim before Sim Shalom and after Avodah. Okay, that's what the Rambam says that they did. Okay, in the second Mishnah, there was the pais, the lottery to see who would bring the Ktoret, right? So now, this is why I did a short recap. So at this point, it's going, this is one of the next things that's going to be done, because the prerequisite avodah of cleaning the Mizbeach was already done. And we're going to talk in the next chapter about how the Ktoret was brought. And then there was a pais to see who would now bring the limbs from the ramp onto the Mizbeach to be burnt. And then the people who weren't working, they would go and change their clothes. They would get out of their Bigdei Kahuna and get into their daily clothes, because they weren't chosen to do anything that day, so they were not going to work. So here in Mishnah Dalet, we said Misha Zacha B'Ktoret. We described that the person who is going to bring the Ktoret, so he would take this vessel called a kaf, which was some kind of a shovel-like vessel, and it held 3 kav, right? The volumetric measure that it held was 3 kav. And then he would take this smaller golden vessel, the bazach, and put it inside of it. And the bazach would be what held the Ktoret. And it was covered so that the Ktoret wouldn't scatter. And it was held inside of the kaf, presumably also as an extra precaution to keep the Ktoret from scattering. So it says, whoever was zocha b'machta, the person who was zocha b'machta. Oh, this is what we're up to. Let me go back to my Mishnah. So who was the person who was zocha b'machta? The machta was this kind of shovel. It was also like a shovel-like vessel that was used for bringing the coals, right? So just to remind ourselves, whoever won the lottery for bringing the machta, what does that mean? The Bartanur explained, that's to take the coals. Somebody had to bring the coals from the outer mizbeach onto the golden mizbeach on the inside. And he says, actually, there was no pais for this. There wasn't a lottery for this, but it was whoever won the lottery for the Ktoret would say to the fellow next to him, you come with me, you'll do the machta, you'll bring the coals. Okay, so then it describes a little bit about how he brought the coals and he takes them from this machta, which is made of silver, and that holds a lot of coals, and he pours it into a golden machta, which holds less, right? So we went from holding 4 to holding 3 kabim. And the extra coals that fell out, that would scatter, they would sweep them into this little stream of water that was next to the Mizbeach so that nobody would get hurt. And then we had this little discussion about the psachter that on Shabbat, right, then when they weren't allowed to put out the extra coals, they would take this huge vessel and put it on top. And then there was this little discussion about the psachter and what else it did. I will point out, so one of the things that it did, psachter haytakli gadol machzeket letech, right? This psachter was a very large vessel that held a letech, which we saw is like, depending on which opinion you hold, it could be between like over 100 liters to maybe 300 liters. It was quite a large kli. And it was, in order to maneuver it, it had two chains, one on each side, so that was the kli that was used also for removing the large amounts of ash that would build up on the main mizbeach. And then in order to maneuver it down, it would be held on both sides, both on the top and on the bottom, by kohanim with chains that they could maneuver it down without it rolling off the ramp. So that was one of the things that the psachter did. The other thing it did is what we mentioned, that it would be put upside down on top of burning coals on Shabbat, and it would also be put on top of a sheretz b'Shabbat. So we're talking about a sheretz, meaning one of the 8 shratzim, one of the 8 kinds of vermin that the Torah mentions, that talks about in Parshat Shmini, that says that if any of these animals die, they impart tuma. They impart a certain kind of tuma if you touch them. And so you're not allowed to have tuma in the Beit HaMikdash. So here in the Mishnah it says that they would be turned on. So what happens if you find a sheretz in the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat? So you want to remove the tuma, but it's also in principle it's muktzah. So the way the Mishnah here says that what they did is they would put this psachter over it so that nobody would become tameh with it. Now, this we did a little bit quickly. So it says at the end, the Bartzinu explains this, they would put this psachter on top of a sheretz that would be found. In other words, when they say a sheretz, meaning a dead sheretz. If a sheretz is alive, it's not mitameh. It doesn't impart tuma unless it's dead. No living thing ever imparts tuma except for humans. Humans are the only living thing, living animals that can impart tuma while they're alive. Any other animal that imparts tuma has to be dead in order for it to be mitameh. Right, so they would put this psachter on top of it so that the kohanim wouldn't become tameh. They weren't allowed to take it out from there on Shabbat. The al shvut kazeh gazru v'afilu b'mikdash. For this kind of shvut, and the shvut is something that the rabbis forbade you to do on Shabbat or Yom Tov. So, as I mentioned last time, even though the general rule is ein shvut b'mikdash, the general rule is that when a shvut was enacted, it didn't hold in the Beit HaMikdash because Kohanim are zrizim, because Kohanim are very zealous in their work, and we're not worried that they will violate Isurim Dioraita, right? And the Shvut is a Gzeirah D'Rabbanan, and it's in this category of a Siyag Torah. It's a kind of fence around the Torah to keep you from violating a Torah law. So in general, these kinds of shvuyot were not enacted for the temple, but this particular one was, according to the way the Bartzinu understands here. For dafka kishnim tzaba azara, and this would only be, in other words, it would only be when it was found in the azara. What would only be? What are we, if you're following, so what are we talking about? What does it mean? It would only be if it was found in the Azara, but if it was found in the Hechal or in the Ulam, Motzi'im oto miyad. It would be taken out immediately and even on Shabbat. So this is Dafka Kishnimtza ba'azara. This was when specifically it was found in the Azara. When what was found in the Azara?
The sherets.
When the sherets would be shut, right. And what would be then what was the din if you found the sherets in the Azara on Shabbat?
Well, you would cover it with the vessel.
Right, so you would cover it with the psachter. But the Bartman says, but if it was found in the Hechal or the Ulam, then it would be taken out immediately. Okay,
taken out to where? Taken out to the Azara or taken out of the preset?
No, and once it would be taken out, it would be taken out altogether. Which is a good question, but hold on a second.
How did they take it out? Not with their hands.
Okay, so I think I showed you this last time briefly, but let's take a moment and understand this a little bit better. And actually, hold on a second. So this notion of removing the sherets from the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat, I think we looked at this briefly, it's the Mishnah at the end of Eruvin. A lot of interesting things at the end of Eruvin. So let's take a moment and look at this. And one of the reasons I'm doing this, aside from the fact that I want to clarify this, in the wake of, Shira wasn't here last time, but she did listen to the recording, and she took time to go through the Mishnah here in Eruvin a little bit more carefully, and she came up with some important questions, particularly about Tanura. All right, so I didn't want to address them at the time, but since she brought them up, and since, again, just for clarification, let's understand this a little bit better. So here we are in the Mishnah in Eruvin. This is the last Mishnah in the last chapter. And this is what it says. Sheret shenimtza b'mikdash. Kohen motzio behem yano. Shelo l'shahot et hatuma. Divrei Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. So if a sheretz, meaning again, if a dead sheretz is found in the mikdash on Shabbat, because if it's on Chol, it's just taken out immediately. Everybody knows that. But there's a problem on Shabbat because it's Muktzah. And Bartanura said that there's this idea that that Shvut, we'll come back to that. Sheret shenimtza b'mikdash, Kohen motzio behem yano. So the Kohen would remove it. In other words, one of the Kohanim would remove it with his belt. So he would take his belt and he would use it to pick up the sherets and then take the sherets out of the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat. Why? Shelo l'shahot et hatuma. In order not to keep tuma dwelling in the Beit HaMikdash. We want to remove tuma from the Beit HaMikdash.
This is a little bit hard to visualize. I mean, is this belt more like something like a sash or broad cummerbund? So I'm trying to figure out how one would pick up a sheret and move it with a belt.
Yeah, think of it as more of the belt is more like a sash, and it wouldn't be that hard to do it. Think of it like that. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, all right, so he says you take it out, and this is in order not, to keep so that tuma isn't waiting around or dwelling in the in the Beit HaMikdash. In other words, the idea, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, is we want to remove it as quickly as possible. So why would he use his belt?
He has it right there.
He has it right there. He doesn't. So that's something. Presumably the first Kohen who sees it, he sees the dead sheretz. He doesn't wait. He takes off his belt. He wraps it up and he walks out of the Beit HaMikdash with it. So that gets rid of the tumah quickly. Rabbi Yehuda Omer bitzvat shel eitz. Rabbi Yehuda says a Kohen removes it with pliers that are like a plier, or I can't remember the other word for it, but whatever. Think of it as like
tongs.
Tongs. Thank you. Like tongs that are made from wood. Shelo lerabot et hatuma. So in order not to make more tuma. So I think I explained this last time, because the tzvat shel eitz itself is a kli that does not become tamei, because it would be the tzvat would have been two pieces of straight wood. And pshutei kli eitz einam mikablim tuma. The kli that's made from wood, that's straight meaning that it doesn't have a receptacle. It doesn't have any place to receive anything. So that doesn't become tamei. So you can remove the sheretz with the tzvat, with the tongs, and you won't make anything else tamei. As opposed to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, who says that you remove it with the belt, so then the belt becomes tamei. The belt is a kli, and it becomes tamei.
But it doesn't have a receptacle.
No, but it's also not made of wood.
Yeah.
Okay. So in other words, clothing can become tamei. Clothing is mekabel tuma, and then there are very strict definitions of that. What's the minimum size, and how complete does it have to be, and so forth. But definitely the belt of the Kohen will qualify as a kli that could become tamei. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says that the priority is to get rid of the tumah as quickly as possible, even if you're going to now make the belt of the Kohen tamei. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it's better, even if you have to wait another couple of minutes, to not make any other kelim tamei. That's better than that. That's more important than the idea that we would get rid of it faster. So that's their machloket. Now notice, according to both Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka and according to Rabbi Yehuda, what don't they say? That we just learned.
Put the vessel.
Right, so they don't talk about putting the vessel on. So let's continue in the Mishnah. According to both of them, on Shabbat, there isn't a shvut that would prevent them from removing the sheretz. The only question is, how do I remove it? So that's their machloket. So now the Mishnah goes on to say, Mehechan motziin otam. From where would they take it out? So the first opinion says, Mina heichal umin ha'ulam umibein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach. Divrei Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas. So here I brought this up. According to this opinion, we're using it. Okay. Yeah. So here just to give us an idea. This is the overhead view. Of course, here is the Mizbeach. Here are the stairs that go up to the Ulam. And the Ulam is this kind of antechamber before the main part of the Beit HaMikdash, and the part where the Kohanim came in to clean the altar and to clean the menorah, that's called the Heichal. That's where the altar, the menorah, and the shulchan that holds the lechem hapanim, right, the showbread, that's in the Heichal. And then beyond the Heichal is Kodesh Kodeshim. Okay. So they don't talk about what happens if the sheretz comes into the Kodesh Kodeshim. Why not?
Because only the Kohen Gadol is in there and only once a year.
Right. So nobody would know. There's no way of knowing. But where could it come in? So it could be that they find a dead sheretz in the Heichal. It could be they find a dead sheretz in the Ulam. Or it could be they find it anywhere in the Azara. This is only, right, there's more of this on the next page. This is like a split screen. Okay, so those are the places that it could be found where it's supposed to be removed, so in order to remove the tumah from the Beit HaMikdash. So, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas, where would they remove it from? He says they would remove it from the Heichal and from the Ulam and from between the Ulam and the altar. Right? So from the Heichal, if it was found here, if it was found here, or if it would be found here, this would be between the altar and the Ulam. Possibly this whole area. By the way, the exact placement here is, I think I've shown you this each time I show you these different maps. It's not precise, but there is this area between the altar and the Ulam. We'll talk about it more in Mishnah Vav as well, back at Tamid. Okay, so that's what he says. If it's found in any of those places, it gets removed either, it's either with the belt or with the tzvat, depending on which opinion you hold. Rabbi Akiva disagrees. He says, "Makom shechayavin al zdono karet ve'al shigagato chatat misham motzi'in oto u'shar kol hamakomot kofin alav psachter." So Rabbi Akiva says, no, it's removed from a place where one would be chayav if they did on purpose, they would be chayav chatat. What does he mean? Kol makom shechayavin al zdono karet. What does it mean? Im yikanes lo betuma. Any part of the Beit HaMikdash area, right, including the Beit HaMikdash and the Azara and all these parts. It says any part that if you went in there knowingly, tamei, you would be chayav karet. And where is that? Dahainu kol ha'azara. Anywhere in the Azara, you'll be chayav karet if you come in. You're not allowed to come into the Beit HaMikdash betuma. And so Rabbi Akiva is saying effectively that in this whole area of the Azara and the Beit HaMikdash, you have to remove it. So what you have to remove the dead sheretz that you find even on Shabbat. So what's his machloket with Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas? What's the difference between Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva?
Rabbi Shimon ben Anas takes a more restrictive view of the places from which you need to remove the sheretz.
Yeah, so what's their machloket? What specifically is different?
So Rabbi Shimon ben Anas says you have to remove it from the Heichal, the Ulam, and the space in the Ulan and the Mizbeach, whereas Rabbi Akiva says you have to move from anywhere in the Azara.
Correct. Very good. So, and then presumably, here, let's not presume, let's just go on. Rabbi Kiva me mekom shelcha yaminos dono kared vel shigegato chatat, right? If you went into any of these areas on purpose, you'd be chayav kared. If you went in unknowingly, not knowing that you're tamei, then you would be chayav a chatat. Yisham motzinoto ushar kol hamekomot. Any other places, kofina lav psachter. Any other place, you would put the psachter over it. In other words, any other place. So there are other parts of the Beit HaMikdash where this din of Tumah doesn't apply. So let's say in the Ezrat Nashim, or there are other places that you go into that other people would come through first before they would get to this area of the Azara. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Mekom shehitiu lecha chachamim, mishelcha natnu lecha, shelo hitiu lecha, ela mishum shvut. So, what does he mean? Rabbi Shimon Omer, Mekom shehitiu lecha chachamim. Rabbi Shimon talig atana kama dileel. Rabbi Shimon disagrees with the Tanakama earlier. Diamar koshrim neima b'mikdash. Actually, you know what? Well, I'm not going to do this part because this goes back to a Mishnah that we didn't do, and it's not. It's pertinent, but it's not immediately pertinent. So I'm going to leave Rabbi Shimon's opinion out of this for now. Okay. So what do we see about the use of the psachter in the Mishnah here in Eruvin? So the only person who mentions the psachter is Rabbi Akiva. He says, if you find a dead sheretz anywhere in the Azara or in the Ulam or in the Hechal on Shabbat, you have to remove it on Shabbat, even on Shabbat. And if you find anywhere else in what we'll call it the Beit HaMikdash compound, then you would put the psachter over it. Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas, who disagrees with him, what did he hold? That if you find it in the Ulam or in the Hechal or between the Mizbeach and the Ulam, you have to remove it. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas, so what if you found it in any other part of the Azara? What would you do?
Presumably you'd put the psachter over it.
Presumably you're putting the psachter over it.
But it's not explicit.
It's not explicit, but this is the understanding. So this is the understanding that, and because otherwise, what would you do, right? In other words, you shouldn't leave it exposed. And according to Rabbi Shimon ben Anas, there isn't a heter to remove it from the rest of the Azara. So he says this shvut of moving a dead sheretz on Shabbat, he says it doesn't apply in the Heichal, the Ulam, and between the Ulam and the Mizbeach. And but it would apply in all the other parts of the Azara. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, it doesn't apply anywhere in the Azara, and all the more so, of course, in the Heichal and in the Ulam, right? Because in all of these places, these are all places for which you would be chayav karet if you came in knowingly tameh. So, but they both agree if it's outside of the places that they say are designated, you find it on Shabbat, you find this dead sheretz on Shabbat, you put this psachter over it, and then after Shabbat you remove it. Okay, so now, if we look back at what the Bartanura said, so what the Bartanura here says is a little strange, right? So first of all, let's understand when we learn the Mishnah in Tamid. So and in here, the focus is, since we mentioned this vessel, the psachter, that we use it to cover up burning coals that fell out of the machta on Shabbat. So we're also going to tell you other things that it was used for. So it was used for covering up the coals. It was used for removing the deshen, the fatty ashes off of the mizbeach, and it was also used to cover up a sheretz on Shabbat. So if I hadn't looked at the Bartanura, I would understand the al sheretz b'Shabbat. I would understand when would it be used to cover up a sheretz on Shabbat. Well, I'll look in the Mishnah and Eruvin, and I'll see, according to Rabbi Akiva, it's anywhere outside of the Azara. And according to Rabbi Shimon ben Anas, it's the Azara except for the part between the Mizbeach and the Ulam and the Hechal and the Ulam. Right? So that's what I would have thought. The Bartanura says, Yal hasheret sh'nimtza b'Azara b'Shabbat, kofin alav p'sachter, kadei shelo yitamu bo hakohanim. He says, stam, if you find a sheretz in the Azara on Shabbat, then you put the psachter over it so that the kohanim do not become tameh. Shein yecholim lahotzio misham. They can't take it out of there. Because for this kind of shvut, Chachamim made a gzeira that you're not allowed to move it even on Shabbat, even in the mikdash. The dafka kishnimtza ba'azara, but it's only true if it's found in the azara. But if you found it in the Yechal or in the Ulam, you take it out of there immediately, even on Shabbat. So what are the problems with this Bartanura in light of the Mishnah that we just learned in Eruvin?
It doesn't break down. It doesn't break down the space in this.
Well, it does differentiate between the Hechal and the Ulam and the Azara. You need to be a little more specific.
You're on.
There's the space between the Mizbeach and the Ulam. That according to Rabbi Akiva, you take out. According to no, I'm sorry, the other way around. You leave. Rabbi Akiva says you do take it out. And is that right? I have to go back and look.
He says he says you take it out from anywhere in the Azara.
Right. So in other words, according to Rabbi Akiva, you take it out from anywhere. So the idea of using the psachter. So if we learn this Mishnah of al hasheretz b'Shabbat, that we put the psachter over the sheretz b'Shabbat. So if we learn this like Rabbi Akiva, it doesn't mean anywhere in the Azara. It only means outside of the Azara. That's the first, right? Because according to Rabbi Akiva, the only place you would use the psachter on Shabbat to cover up this sheretz would be outside of the Hechal, the Ulam, and the Azara. It would be not in any part of the Beit HaMikdash proper, including the Azara. And if you say it's like Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas, you would use it only in the Azara, except for this area between the Ulam and the Mizbeach. And all the rest of the Azara, you would use it. But the Bartanura says, stam. He says, if you find a sheretz in the Azara on Shabbat, kofin alav psachter kadei shelo yitamu bo kohanim. That's like nobody. In other words, neither, because Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas holds not everywhere in the Azara would you use the psachter. You would still use it in this portion that's between the Ulam and the Mizbeach. And according to Rabbi Akiva, you don't use it at all in the Azara. You have to remove the sheretz from the Azara. So this Bartanura is difficult. It raises these questions. And just a second. So because it's interesting, and because Shira noticed these things, she understood that this doesn't square. So I told her to look at this, and I'm going to show it to you also. The Tosfos Yom Tov here in our Mishnah on Tamid, he raises these issues. Bial HaSheretz, right? When it's talking about the Sheretz, you find, right, the Mishnah we just learned, that you find the Sheretz in the Sheretz on Shabbat, you cover it with the Psach. And he brings the Bartanura, Shon Harav, or Shon Rabbeinu Bartanura, Shenimtza ba'azara, that's found in the Azara. So the Tosfos Yom Tov says, Lo dak l'michtav ali b'dehilchata. He wasn't careful to write this explanation according to halacha. The halacha ka Rabbi Akiva, because first of all, halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, sheomer b'mishnah desof eruvin, she'af min ha'azara motzim b'makom shechayivin az dono karet. Right, like we just said. So quickly, it doesn't work out. The halacha here is like Rabbi Akiva, because the general rule in halacha with Rabbi Akiva is halacha. I think we mentioned before. You may have learned halacha ka Rabbi Akiva mechave ro, lo mechave rav. Is anybody familiar with that statement?
Yes.
What does that mean?
So basically, if it's Rabbi Akiva, I believe it's versus Rabbi Ishmael, then we rule like Rabbi.
No.
Or Rabbi Akiva versus a single rabbi. There's Rabbi Akiva, and it's Rabbi Akiva versus the Rabbanim as a collective. Then it's like the.
Yes. So there's Rabbi Akiva, halacha ka Rabbi Akiva mechave ro. If Rabbi Akiva is arguing, if it's brought down that Rabbi Akiva is arguing with one other rabbi, then halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. But lo mechave rav, if he's arguing with the chachamim, the unnamed chachamim, then halacha will be like the chachamim. So in the Mishnah that we saw in Eruvin, he's only arguing with Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas. So it means halacha is going to be like Rabbi Akiva. So this is the point that the Tosfos Yom Tov makes. Shafmin azaram motzin b'makom shechayavin karet v'ken ma shekatav harav aval nimtza behechal o b'ulam. It says, and also that which the Rav wrote, that if it was found in the hechal or the ulam, that it would be taken out. Lo dak klal. He wasn't careful here at all. Right? He wasn't exacting at all. Shizeh after lo Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas, the paliga de Rabbi Akiva. This isn't even like Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas, who argues with Rabbi Akiva. Dahat tenan hatan, because we learn in the Mishnah there, demode af b'mibein ha'ulam u'lemizbeach. Right? If the Bartanura is trying to explain our Mishnah here in Tamid according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas, which wouldn't be the halacha, but bo nagid, that's the way he wanted to explain it, then he also wasn't exacting in his words, because he should have said, if it was found in the hechal, in the ulam, or between the ulam and the mizbeach, like Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas. All right, so that this idea of shvut, what kind, there were certain shvuyot that were in the Mikdash, and that's actually a little bit earlier in the chapter in Erev, and we don't have to look at that. So Tosfos Yom Tov is maksheh. He asks these questions on the Bartanura, and he doesn't answer them. He doesn't give us an answer for why they are what they are. I had a kind of theory about why he did it, but I haven't proven it yet, so I'm not going to try to defend the Bartanura. Not that I wouldn't want to, but I have an idea. If I figure it out, I'll let you know. Okay, so so that was a little bit of a diversion, but since it was raised, I thought it's worth looking in. So the other thing I think pursuant to something we talked about last time, it also gives you an idea of the kind of consciousness that you had if you were working in the Beit HaMikdash. Right, we were talking last time about this idea of like, these, here it's describing in a fair amount of detail what people did in the Beit HaMikdash. And this is, we're really just scratching the surface of it in all the chapters that we've done. There's a lot more to it. But this shows you another insight, that Kohanim were very careful about Tumah. We had another example of this high attention to Tumah earlier when we were learning Yoma. Does it bring to mind a particular story that we learned?
It brings to mind the case of the Baal Keri, who would need to immerse himself.
Well, yes, okay, yes, that's true. That we learned in Tamid, that if somebody's a Baal Keri, then he had to go down and immerse himself. But what we learned a story in Yoma, that the attention to the fear of bringing Tumah in the Beit HaMikdash was very striking. I'm being a little cryptic here, but I'll give it away in a second if nobody knows what I'm talking about. When we were learning Yoma, we learned the story in the Mishnah about how before there was a payas for Trumat HaDeshen, they had a foot race.
This referred to the case of the Kohen who's basically killed, and there's the questions what to do with his corpse.
What do you mean basically killed? What does it mean to be basically killed?
Killed. Dead as a doorknob.
Okay, so that story wasn't in the Mishnah, but I brought it. It's a price that the Gemara brings on that Mishnah, and the way the story plays out, the Kohen is stabbed, but then his father says that he's still alive, so we can remove him before the Tumah would come. And at the time, we remarked on that. In other words, that was one of the places where you see this consciousness of not allowing Tumah into the Beit HaMikdash was very uppermost in the Kohen's minds, even to a fault, you might say, even to a fault. But you see it here. You see this idea that they would be looking at, if they saw a dead sheretz, you had to do something about it. So there are different opinions about what you do, but you have to do something about it. Okay, I think in the last few minutes, let's look at the last Mishnah in the 5th chapter. Yes, we are back. Okay. So now, Higiu ben ha'ulam v'lamizbeach. They came between the ulam and the mizbeach. So who came between the ulam and the mizbeach?
These are the Kohanim who are cleaning off the Mizbeach.
So the people who cleaned off the what do you mean? Which Mizbeach did they clean?
The penny.
I'm sorry, your sound cut out.
The penemy, the Mizbeach HaKtorah.
So the cleaning of the Mizbeach HaKtorah, that was already done.
Process of elimination.
But what did we discuss in the last Mishnah? That we mentioned that
the main Mizbeach, where the sacrifices are brought.
So that Higiu ben ha'olam v'mizbeach natalata ma'grifam b'zorka ben ha'olam v'mizbeach. So here, let me just go back a little bit. So what do we say back in Mishnah Daled, we talked about the person who's going to bring the Ketoret, right? The cleaning of the Mizbeach Ketoret, that was done before they davened, and at the same time that they were slaughtering and cutting up the Korban Tamid, that's when the Mizbeach HaKetoret and the menorah were being cleaned. While the people were cleaning those things inside, the Tamid was being was being slaughtered and being prepared to be offered on the outside. Then they all gathered in the Lishkat Gazit to daven, and then they did the payis for the Ketoret, and they did the payis to see who was going to bring the limbs of the Korban Tamid onto the Mizbeach. So then we describe this, that the person who won the payis for the Ketoret, he got the Ketoret, he put it into a bazach, into a kaf, and he brought his friend with him to take a machta, to take this kind of coal shovel, this silver coal shovel, remove coals from the Mizbeach, take them down, dump them into a smaller golden pan, and get rid of the excess coals, right? So those were the last people that we were talking about. So higiu bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach. So now those people who are going to do the Ketoret, they came now between the ulam and the mizbeach. So, 1 second. So what happened? Because the guy who had the machta, he had to take some coals. He would take the coals from this area here of the mizbeach. This is the area that they were going to use to burn the tamid. It's on the eastern, like the southeastern side. And then we learned about this earlier, that this was the area they were going to use for the Ketoret. So he got the coals, and now the person who's holding the hams that have the Ketoret and the person who has the burning coals, they are now between the ulam and the mizbeach, right? So we understand that that's a significant area. So one of them would take the magrefa and he would throw it between the ulam and the altar. A person could not hear the voice of his friend or somebody standing next to him because of the sound that was made from the magrefa. And it served 3 purposes. Kohen sheshomea et kola, yodea she'achav ha'kohanim nichnasim lihishtachavot, v'hu ratz uba. So a Kohen who hears that sound of the magrefa being thrown, he knows that his priestly brethren are going inside to bow down. Where are they going to go inside to? You're going to go into the Hechal. And so he runs and comes. The Kohen who hears us, he will run and come. Uven Levi shehu shomei et kola. A Levi who hears the sound of the magrefa being thrown between the ulam and the mizbeach, yodea she'achav halaviim nichnasim ledaber bashir. He knows that his brethren, the Leviim, are going to go in to speak the song, to speak in song. V'hu ratzuba, and he runs and comes. V'rosh ha'ma'amad haya ma'amid et hatmeim b'shar ha'mizrach. And the head of the ma'amad, he would stand up those who were tamei at the eastern gate. Okay, so there's a few things going on here. Let's see how the Bar Tzunura understands. So the first thing is Higiu ben haolam v'lamizbeach. These are, again, going back not to the people who cleaned the mizbeach, but these were the people who are going to go in and do the ketoret, and the people are going to going to burn the ketoret. So one would take the magrefa and throw it between the olam and the mizbeach. Now we have this word magrefa before. Does anybody remember where and what it did?
I recall magrefa was also the sort of the outer vessel, or not vessels, the outer, there's the inner container used to hold the ketoret.
Oh, that's called a no, that's not the magrefa. That's a that's a machta. Or that, I'm sorry, that you're thinking that's the kaf, and then we have a machta, which is used to remove the coals. But we have this word magrefa.
It's for the deshen, which is in what? Do you hear me? The deshen which accumulated in the center of the altar, the outside altar.
Right. So the magrefa, in that magrefa, we understood was the same. It's also like now in modern Hebrews, it was a kind of a rake. It would be used to rake coals on, like coals and deshen on the mizbeach. There was also a magrefa. Just a second. Here, in the third chapter, Mishnah Chet, Yericho hayu shomim kol shar hagadol sheniftach. From Yericho, that people could hear the sound of the large gate that was being opened in the Beit HaMikdash. Yericho hayu shomim kol hamagrefa. From Yericho, they could hear the sound of the magrefa. So what did the Bartanura say then? He said, a magrefa min kli nigun shahaya b'mikdash. It was a kind of a musical instrument that was in the Beit HaMikdash. Asara nekavim ayubo. It had 10 holes. Each hole could produce 100 notes, 100 types of musical sound. The kolon nishma ad lemerachok, and its sound could be heard from far away. So that's the second type of magrefa. It was a musical instrument. So now when we come and see this magrefa that they throw between the mizbeach and the ulam, we have to wonder, what magrefa was it? Was it this kind of rake that was used for raking the coals on the mizbeach? Or was it this musical instrument, which we know made a great sound, but it made a great sound, presumably as some kind of a wind instrument, and not because it was thrown. So the Bartanura says, "Hamagrefa kli gadol shayuzor kimoto kedei lashmiya kol." It was a big vessel, big instrument that would be thrown in order to make it sound. And the sound that came from it would serve these three things. So most Mefarshim understand that this is a third kind of magrefa. Nobody knows exactly what it is. I found an article where somebody theorized that it was a kind of a gong, that they wouldn't, so according to that, I guess they wouldn't have thrown the magrefa itself, but they could have thrown something at the magrefa, like a mallet, and that would have made a big sound that could be heard from far away. It's not clear what it is, but according to several Rishonim, this is a third kind of magrefa. The idea being that the musical instrument that's described in the third chapter doesn't sound like the kind of musical instrument that you throw. And if it's the magrefa that's a rake, why would it make such a big sound? Right? So it seems like it's something else, and nobody knows exactly what it was. So the sounding of the magrefa served three things. One of them was that Kohen Shomea Kola Im Lo Haya Ba'azara. So Kohen who was not in the Azara at that time, he would hear this sound. He would come, he would run and come to bow down with his priestly brethren. And if it was a Levi, he would come and he would know it was time for him to join in the song with his fellow Levim. I didn't find anybody yet who talks about the verb here, lidaber b'shir, to speak shir. I'm not sure why that verb is used. We understand that they did sing. It was a mitzvah. It was part of the avodah in the Beit HaMikdash that they sang. So I'm not sure. I think there's something more to be said about that, but I didn't find it yet. And Rosh Ma'amad, Kishaya Shomea Kol HaMagrefa, the head of the Ma'amad, when he would hear the sound of the Magrefa, so what's the Ma'amad?
Ma'amad would be priests in that particular shift.
So that would be the Mishmar.
Okay, I'm batting a perfect zero.
No, but you're close. So it wasn't the Kohanim, it was...
Well, actually be the Bnei Yisrael, be the... and we've already talked to Kohanim, we've already talked to Levi'im, so presumably it would be the Bnei Yisraelim who are basically there as observers, as witnesses.
Well, what were the Ma'amadot? Why were the Yisraelim in the Beit HaMikdash on any given day as part of a Ma'amad? What did the Ma'amad do?
Check that there are no mistakes and that they do everything according to the rules.
No, that wasn't really their job. And also they couldn't necessarily come to all the places inside. But they were there to daven, essentially, along with so the idea is what the Kohanim are doing, what we're describing in terms of the service of the Kohanim. So of course the basic service of the Kohanim was to bring the Korbanot Tamid and to bring the Ketoret and to light the menorah. And all of those things are for who? That's for Klal Yisrael. So the Klal Yisrael can't all be there to participate in real time. So they had representatives in the form of the Ma'amadot. The Ma'amadot would be there to represent the Yisrael, like Michael just said. So you didn't, right? You got the basic idea. In other words, the Magrefa was the signal for the Kohanim to do this, for the Levim to do this, and for the Yisrael, who would be there, in this case, the Rosh Ma'amad, the head of the Ma'amad, he would be there to do this. So what was the this? He would stand up the Tmeim at the eastern gate. So the eastern gate, let's see. This is the eastern, wait a second, can you see that? Yeah, I never know when it switches this is the eastern gate. So this is it we saw that some of the Kohanim come in on the northwest side through Beit HaMoked, like the Mimunei came in the morning through the Beit HaMoked on the northwest side. But if you were a plain Yisrael, you would come into the Beit HaMikdash there were different places you could come in, but one of them would be the Eastern Gate. This would be the Eastern Gate that leads into the first compound, which is the Ezrat Nashi. So the Rosh Ma'amad, would stand up the Tameim at the Eastern Gate. So what was that about? Who were these Tameim and what was he doing with them? There are different interpretations of this. So we'll see what the Bartanur brings. Hayama Amira Tameim Shaloto Beit Av Shalo Hayu Ru'uyim La'avod. So this is a little bit like what Paul just said, but not exactly. He would bring and stand the Tameim who were with that Beit Av. So what was the Beit Av?
The for lack of a better word, the clan or the tribe, the group that was on service at that time.
From the Kohanim, right? Right. So there's the Beit. Right. So we had the Mishmar that was divided up into the Batei Av. So whoever was in the Beit Av, who was Tameh, that Shelo Hayu Ru'uyim La'avod, they weren't fit to work because they're Tameh. They're not even allowed to come into the Beit HaMikdash. He would stand them up. Here in his Girsa says, B'sha'arei HaMizrach, in the eastern gates. Ita Amri, Kedei Levaishano, Hodia Shemimnei Tumat Keri, Hu Nimna La'avod. So some people say they were stood up publicly, essentially, in order to shame them. So to let everybody know that here, these people can't do their proper service because they became tameh with tumat keri, and now they can't work, they can't do their service. Kedei shizaher pamacher, by publicly shaming, it was to make them be careful that it wouldn't happen again. The itamri mimnei chashad, some people say it was because of suspicion. What does it mean, mimnei chashad? Shelo yichashduhu shelemlachto halach v'hiniach milavod. Some people think it was in order to avoid or to turn suspicion away from Kohanim who were not working from that Beit Av. So that people shouldn't think that the reason that they're not doing their service is because they scampered off somewhere else, right? That he went off to do work somewhere else, and he set his service aside. It would be because of some accidental exposure to tuma, like tumat sheretz or something else. That's what kept him from doing the avodah. Rambam katav shimitzorim shekvar taharu mitzaratam haya ba'amida b'shar mizrach. He says it's not that at all. It's not the people from the Beit Av. It would be anybody who had tzara'at, who's already now tahor from their tzara'at. They would be brought to the eastern gate, kedei shiu mizumanim lizrok aleim dam ha'asham, so that they would be there ready in order for the kohen to sprinkle blood from their korban asham. That was part of the final tahara for a mitzorah. So those are the possibilities. But that's what happened. And then next week we'll go on to the next chapter, and we'll talk about how the Ketoret was brought. Just a second. Yeah. And that's it for tonight. Any questions, comments, criticism?
Shel, I get the feeling that working at doing the avodah at the Beit HaMikdash, it's like working in a nuclear reactor. If you don't follow the instructions exactly, but it's extremely dangerous. And I think it should have been very frightening, because it would be easy to do a mistake.
You know what? I think this is a very good point. It's a very interesting point. My own sense is that I think even in principle, you're correct. And I think that a lot of Kohanim would have seen it the same way. But I also think that Kohanim who, you know, did this all the time, they develop a certain familiarity with it. And maybe they don't all take it as seriously. One of the reasons I say this is because of some stories that are brought in different parts of Chazal about the way Kohanim would treat each other, how they would fight over food and things like that. Although, but the other reason I say is, in a sense, based on my own personal experience as a Sofer Stam. So when you learn Sofrut, you know, and now I'm teaching also Sofrut, you also learn what a tremendous responsibility is. And if you make a small mistake, you could make, you know, a whole Sefer Torah pasul, or you could make tefillin pasul. And so you take this all very seriously. On the other hand, if you actually lived in fear like that all the time, you would be paralyzed, like you wouldn't do anything. So when you do it enough, you get a certain kind of familiarity that not everybody has. It doesn't mean that I don't take it as seriously. I think I take it extremely seriously, and I'm still very, very careful. But I think of this like when I'm showing, like when I'm opening up a pair of tefillin, and you have to like cut into it, and it's kind of brutal. And I don't usually do it in front of people who aren't so framed, because people get very frightened. And the same thing also, like when I'm working on a Sefer Torah and how I roll it and how I handle it, I'm actually being very careful. But because I have a lot of familiarity and I know how much tension I can put on it and how I can roll it and how I can handle it, I wouldn't expect other people who don't do it every day to view it the same way. I suspect that Kohanim who did work in the temple, you know, so you know, every day or every few weeks, depending on where they were in the, you know, in the totem pole, I expect that a lot of them also had this familiarity with it, because you need to have, like, you need to maintain this yirah, this awe, but not too much, because otherwise you won't do anything. You'll be completely paralyzed. But yes, I think your analogy to a nuclear reactor, it works on many levels, actually. So
even visually, the outline of the building reminds me of, in some sense, of a containment valve.
That's it. Oy. Yeah, I get it. Okay, so Bezrat Hashem, we will meet next week. And actually, I just about finished the sheets for the next parak. I'll send them to you soon. Thank you.
So it occurs to me that for reading into Yoma, in fact, there really was a mushroom cloud.
Well, does it say it was a mushroom cloud?
No, it doesn't say mushroom cloud, but I mean the actual shape. The actual shape is.
Right, we don't know the shape of it, but yes, there was a cloud. I do think, no, but that's what I mean. I think the nuclear reactor comparison is apt in the sense that it was very powerful. We were dealing with very powerful things here. And so, yes, you do have to be extremely careful. Okay, Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.
Good night. Thank you.